Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. We've got two boxes here. Inside of them, I don't know what they are. It's been a while since I bought these, but hopefully it's some cool devices. Let's get these opened up, see what we've got, and then hopefully we've got some interesting stuff to make a video about. Let's begin. All right, so we've got ourselves an iPhone 6 right here. This is the space gray color and in fairly nice condition. Felt like the screen might have been raised up a little bit. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I can kind of feel a little bit of an edge there. Does have power, so it is turning on. We will see what's special about that. We've got ourselves an iPad. I believe it says a second gen. I don't think it's a third gen based on the model number. But we're also going to see if this has any power, and it does. We've got an old Apple logo right away. That's a good sign. So assuming this is a second gen, that could be iOS 4, 5, or 6. If it's a third gen, it could be iOS 5 or 6. Either way, hopefully a pretty cool version. Looks like our iPhone 6 died. I'm going to get that plugged in. Yeah, that thing's dead. And here's our iPad, whatever it is. Looks like a second gen because we've got the old slider down there. Low battery, and this is iOS 4, so that's a really good sign. We've got 6% battery up there. I don't know if it's going to focus for you guys right there, 6%. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get these cleaned up, plugged into power, and once these things are charged, we're going to talk about these devices, and we're going to find out if our iPhone 6 has a special version of iOS or not. So we'll be back once these are charged. All right, we got the devices cleaned up. Here is that iPad 2nd gen in the beautiful white color and our gorgeous iPhone 6. This one is in space gray. Now let's start with the iPad because as you can see, this thing is at the lock screen there, and we're gonna go ahead and slide to unlock. Just like that, we are at the iOS 4 home screen here on the iPad 2nd gen. Now, if we head into settings, general, and about, you can see this is 4.3.5. It's a 16 gig model and it is Wi-Fi only. So base configuration here, but still cool nonetheless to get one of these on iOS 4. These are fairly difficult to find. I think because the iPad 2nd gen was such a popular iPad, so many people bought them. And these things were sold for a long time. They were actually sold up alongside the iPad Air 1st generation that came out in 2013. You could actually, for a short while, still buy the iPad 2nd gen. So that is a huge length of time that this thing was available for, and it sold really well. It was a fantastic device with its dual-core A5 chip, 0.5 gigabyte of RAM, not a Retina display, but if you have this thing on iOS 4, 5, or 6, you really don't notice that big of a difference between not having a Retina display because these versions were made for devices without it. Once you get into iOS 7, 8, and 9 is when this thing really shows its age, not only with that display, but also with performance. Now, one thing I'm not sure I've shown you guys before, but I think it's time. I want y'all to see how awful the video camera is on this iPad. It is a 0.7 megapixel lens. I believe it's the same one that you would find on an iPod Touch 4th gen. It is terrible. We're gonna go ahead and fire up that video camera here. I'm gonna start a video and then we're gonna switch over so you guys can see what this is like. Okay, here we are on that iPad 2nd gen. Look how grainy this is. I don't know how it's gonna sound, but I don't think the microphone on this is very good. There's the main setup there. I shattered my screen protector. Luckily not the display, just the protector there. I don't even know if that's gonna show up for you guys. But here we've got some cool devices. We've got an iPhone 7 Plus in the red color, my favorite color iPhone of all time. And we have an iPhone XR in the white. I'm noticing how shaky this thing feels. There's no stabilization here. The colors are probably the only thing this has going for it. Certainly not the resolution. This is not a nice experience. So let's go ahead and switch back to our 4K iPhone. Okay, there you guys got to suffer through the iPad 2nd gen's video camera. Terrible. The fact that people use this to record things blows my mind. I don't even know why they put cameras on this. It is a complete joke to have cameras this bad on an iPad. But let's go ahead and put this down. Here is the iPhone 6. This is the real star of the show in my opinion, because finding one of these on its original version of iOS is very difficult. This one's on the slide to setup screen, and I don't know if you guys can tell, but since that A is curly, that means that this is in fact iOS 8. I'm pretty sure. I'm actually not as certain on that as maybe I should be, but I believe that is iOS 8. It could be 9, but let's go ahead and fly through this setup here. Hopefully there's no accounts or activation issues. We're going to get this thing connected to Wi-Fi and see what happens. All right, moment of truth on the Wi-Fi network. Will this thing activate, or will it give us an account, an Apple ID, an iCloud login? Hopefully not. And okay, look at that. No problems there. That is a big sigh of relief. Sometimes you never know with these older iPhones, especially iPhone 6 and 6S. They kind of have their own minds at times. But let's go ahead and get through this setup screen here, just making sure Touch ID is working, and it is. This was the second iPhone to feature Touch ID. Came out on the 5S, and then the iPhone 6 used that same first generation Touch ID sensor. It wasn't until the iPhone 6S where we got a second gen Touch ID, and that thing was actually quite a bit faster. I think in terms of numbers, I don't know what it actually is, but it does feel a lot quicker on an iPhone 6S or newer compared to a 5S and an iPhone 6. So here we are, definitely iOS 8, and it's prompting us right away to upgrade to iOS 12. That is the last version that this iPhone got, and it all started here with iOS 8 when this thing came out in 2014. Let's see which version we've got, and it is 8.4, so actually a really late version of iOS 8. I was hoping for 8.0 or something like that. That would have been sweet, but it is a 16 gig model, not the most interesting here. I was going to check the battery health, but I don't think that came out until like iOS 11 maybe is when that was introduced. We don't even get low power mode here on the iPhone 6. That came out in iOS 9. But this thing, the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus were launched in 2014. They replaced the iPhone 5S, and they were a huge leap forward for Apple. Brand new design. This was the first time that Apple had made larger phones. They had been overshadowed, perhaps quite literally, by the larger phones of the other companies at the time, like Samsung and HTC. The Apple iPhone was the last to the game for the larger smartphones, at least compared to some of the rivals that this thing competed with. So the 6 and the 6 Plus with its 4.7-inch display and then 5.5-inch display, just like this one does have here, was a big change for Apple. Unfortunately, they kind of limited this device in a couple different ways. One of them is physical, and that's with the aluminum frame. Some of you may know that this is the thinnest iPhone Apple ever launched, the iPhone 6. Now, the 6 Plus was a little bit thicker, and the iPhone 6S after it was a little bit thicker as well. The iPhone 6 holds the record for thinnest iPhone of all time, and we may actually see that change here with the rumored iPhone 17 Air, I think is what it's called right now, here slated for release in 2025. We'll see how thin that is, but up until that, this is the thinnest iPhone, and that did not come without problems. This thing had an issue known as Bendgate. I will perhaps find a photo and throw it up on the screen. That is what happened when this iPhone was subject to forces that many of us would consider normal for a device like this. People would just have this in their pocket, and when they sat down, kind of the curvature of the body pressed against the phone would cause it to literally bend, and people would have a phone that had more of like a U-shaped, and if that didn't completely break the phone, it certainly made it awkward to use with a bend in it. Now, this phone has the Apple A8 CPU. It's a pretty powerful chip, but Apple really limited it with only a single gigabyte of RAM. That's the same as you would find in the iPhone 5S and the 5 before it. So the fact that this only had a single gig really limited this device and kept it on iOS 12. If you compare this to an iPad mini 4th gen, that also has an A8 CPU, the same one inside of this iPhone, but that has 2 gigs of RAM, and that iPad got iOS 15. So 3 years and 3 major iOS update difference from only having a single gigabyte of RAM here on the iPhone 6. I think Apple knew what they were doing, and they knew the 6S was going to be much more powerful and have that extra gig of RAM and would be better supported for years to come, and it definitely was. This thing did not have a great run. iOS 8 feels very smooth and snappy. I mean, everything loads and opens very quickly, but even starting on iOS 9, this thing began to slow down and show its age, and I have to contribute that to the fact that this iPhone was so limited with its memory, only a single gigabyte. Now, I showed you guys the camera on the iPad 2nd gen, I'm also going to show you the camera here on the iPhone 6. This is an 8 megapixel lens. This is the first iPhone with a camera bump. This was also the first phone to feature 60 FPS recording at 1080p. And that is exactly what we're going to do here. So you can see we've got the 60 FPS logo down there indicating that we are recording at a higher frame rate. So here we go. Let's go ahead and switch to the iPhone 6. Now here it is. This looks much better than that iPad 2nd gen. Of course, this is 8 megapixels at 1080p. The frame rate should match the rest of the video there with 60 frames per second. And you can see that this does look pretty smooth. Of course, the iPad 2nd gen display is running at 60 frames per second, but that thing could not come anywhere close to recording 60 frames per second video. So we'll take a quick look here at our devices and we'll see how those colors show up here on the iPhone 6. Overall, pretty impressed. No optical image stabilization, so this probably is going to look a little bit shaky to you guys. So with all that, let's go ahead and switch back. So there you got to see and hear how the iPhone 6 records video. This thing is 10 years old, actually more than 10. It came out in 2014, so it's about 10 and a half years old. It'll be 11 years here in the fall of 2025. Still looks pretty good. Very, very successful phone. I believe this was the best selling smartphone of all time, and I think it still holds that record for the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. I know it's the best selling iPhone. I do believe it is the #1 most sold smartphone of all time in the entire world. So pretty cool devices, two very popular iOS products here with the iPhone 6 and the iPad 2nd gen. These things had fantastic runs and millions of people use these devices. Let me know down in the comments if any of you guys use an iPhone 6 or an iPad 2nd gen here in 2025. I would definitely be interested to hear that. That's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed taking a look here at two of these old iOS products on their original versions of iOS. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.